Hello and welcome to the tutorial about placing eyes that run along the surface of your rigged 3D character. Now this is a character that I've rigged up the body and kind of a very basic face rig here in Advanced Skeleton. But because of these stylized eyes that just sort of glide along the surface, not operate like the usual eyes. There's no eye holes, there's no eyelids. So I wasn't able to use the Advanced Skeleton setup, but instead what I've done is I've made a custom setup. And I'm going to use a custom setup that follow these eye trackers. I sort of decoupled them from the original eye controls and wound up using them instead for these ear controls so that nothing was wasted. But the solution for these eyes in particular has to be custom. So what are the things I'm going to be using? Well, first of all, I actually want to unskin them because I'm going to be applying a different type of a constraint to them. So I need them unbound first. And secondly, I need to make sure that the pivot point is in the center of that geometry. So there we are. And pretty much it'd be nice if I could have the same with the head, but I don't think that's going to happen. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to save this scene because you always want to save your scene first before you go into any operations where things might get a bit dicey. And I'm going to constrain the eye to the head's geometry. The first thing I want to do is identify where that is in the outliner here, so I can see when I put the constraint on if I've put it on the right thing. So again, the eye geometry is going to be constrained to the head geometry. So the last thing I want to select will be the eye. So let's go down here to constrain geometry. And I can see if the constraint is actually on the correct mesh, which is the eye. And the next thing I want to do is come up to constraint again and go down to normal. And I'm just using the default values of these. So watch what happens here. Now it's running along the normal. And what I can do is, as I move it, you see it actually sort of adheres to the surface. A little awkwardly in some places. But I can maintain this as the proper geometry. So let's now do it to the other one. And I've turned this 90 degrees. And see, that's the way it should be. But you want to turn it 90 degrees and freeze it so that this is the new direction, because it's going to flatten against the geometry of the head. So watch what happens here. And again, I want to make sure the last thing I select is the geometry that will be constrained. So let's go to geometry and then go to constrain normal. You can see that the eye flattens there. And if you move it, if you just go into translate, it's going to run along the geometry like that. And if you want a little bit of room off the geometry, that's pretty simple as well. All you have to do is grab both of the eyes and drag the pivot points back a bit. And it's the pivot points that stay on the surface, remember. So when this comes back to being moved, it'll actually pop a little bit off the surface. So you have a little bit of room there in case you don't want the interpenetration to be evident when you're doing your animation. So this may work fine. And the last thing I want to do, so the last little touch I want to do on this is to have these constrained to the original eye controls here given by Advanced Skeleton. And since I repurposed them again for the ears, I'm just going to make sure that they are equidistant. Negative 56 and 56. And see if I can't come up here and freeze those in just the translation. There we are. Freeze the other one. Perfect. All right, and now I want to make sure that this is being controlled by this controller, this little aim eye. So I'm going to grab the aim, I'm then going to grab the eye, come up here to constrain, and go to parent. And now when I move this, you see it runs along the geometry like that. And I again now have a 0, 0, 0 to place it where it needs to be. So just grab the controller, then the eye, then go to constrain, parent, same thing. And now this controls both. You know, again, you gotta watch that pop over the bridge of the nose. But for most intents and purposes, this will work just fine. So there we are. Anyway, happy animating. I hope that works for you.